today we're actually going to be going over all of the issues with the C5 and C6 Corvette and how to fix them. And I'm even going to put links in the description of all the parts mentioned in the video. And we're going to go just bumper to bumper, front to rear, and cover pretty much every common issue with these. Starting at the very front of the car, the main issue with the C5s and the C6s don't have this problem because they're a top feed. These draw air into the radiator through the bottom of the car. So there's an air dam on the bottom here, a little plastic piece. So if you're ever missing that, or you put some sort of lip or something on front of the car, your car is immediately going to overheat because it can't draw that air properly up into the radiator. You can actually see from the engine bay, there's this plastic piece here, and it kind of just directs all that air in. So I do have a front lip right here. This actually caused a lot of problems as soon as I tried to put that on. So what a lot of people do is they'll cut slits here, and you can actually pull the bumper cover up a little bit, and that'll create an air channel between the splitter and the bumper itself, so you can still feed air up in there. Okay, so as you can see, this is the air dam that directs the air in. The next issue is power steering related. So a lot of times you'll blow out the seals in the power steering rack because C5s and C6s run a pretty aggressive wide tire in the front, and it puts a lot of stress on the steering system. So two common things you can do here. So the steering rack, a lot of people just swap it with a new rack if they start leaking. There's not really much you can do there as far as an upgrade, but just keep an eye on that. But the power steering pumps themselves, Turn 1 sells different stages of upgraded power steering pumps, and that has Teflon seals inside and better bearings to handle more of a load in the steering system. The last component with the steering is they do come with an oil cooler. I think the Z06s do, but not the base models. But make sure you have a pretty good power steering cooler, especially if you're running a wider tire. So I got a 275 in the front, pretty sticky tire. So as you're turning a lot or you're doing autocross, it's pretty important to keep that steering system in a operable temperature range. All right, so the LS1 and LS6 engines, they have steam ports from the factory. So you have the cylinder heads here, and you can see there's a steam port, a crossover tube here. Now what happens is they don't have a crossover tube in the rear. They're kind of blocked off from the factory. So you can actually take another stock front crossover tube, put it in the rear, link those together with a hose like I did here, and kind of tee it off. But you really need those rear steam ports on these. It actually can overheat your cylinders 7 and 8 in the back, and a lot of people will crack the sleeves. So that's actually what happened to mine, my LS6. I had a cracked sleeve on cylinder 7 here and completely ruined the engine. So adding those steam ports in the rear will keep those rear cylinders cool, and you'll be a lot better off longevity-wise. The other thing is, a lot of people say the design of this fuel rail doesn't really facilitate good fuel pressure on the ends of this rail here. So a lot of people actually switch out this fuel rail for an aftermarket one, especially when they go with a different manifold design, because this crossover design doesn't allow for a lot of room for an aftermarket one anyways. So you can trace as the fuel comes in, these are the last points of contact. So these end cylinders are always going to run a little bit leaner fuel-wise than the center ones getting the direct fuel delivery. Okay, so let's talk about the electrical system. I'm actually going to start with the battery. The stock battery terminals always fray or don't have enough grounding, and a lot of people will actually switch out these terminals for aftermarket ones and put in thicker ground cables. You can have a lot of electrical gremlins if you don't really pay attention to how your controls are grounded through the chassis. So a lot of people actually have issues, especially in the northeast areas where there's a lot of corrosion and stuff. Their ground points will get rusted or corroded, and then all these electrical gremlins will come up. So they have guides online of where all the grounding points are for all the electronics in the car. So if you have some weird intermittent electrical issues, look into your ground points. What you're going to want to do is just unhook the ground cable, hit it with some sandpaper on both the cable and where it mates to, and then put it back on, and then you should have a good ground. The stock PCV system, a lot of these have issues with oil consumption, and it's because they don't have an oil catch can in line to catch any oil vapor, and motors that draw a lot of vacuum like the LS will just suck in a lot of oil vapor and burn it off through the motor. So catching it here, you'll have less chance of all that blow by going into your engine and getting stuck on the top of the valves and all that. So these catch cans, they have ones that mount directly to the motor like this, or you can go with a catch can that, you know, routes somewhere else. But these LSs actually require a pretty big catch can, or else you're just going to get that oil consumption, especially for track use or higher RPM stuff. Okay, so I want to talk about the clutch system next on these, because a lot of people end up having transmission and synchro issues, and it all stems from the clutch itself. And I have another video going into detail about this, so I'm not going to cover too much of it. I'll have a link to that video, but essentially what you want to do is throw in a TIC Performance master cylinder. It's adjustable, and the diameter is a lot bigger and can push a lot more clutch fluid. That will cause the pressure plate to actually release fully, and you won't get drag between shifts. So a lot of issues with these cars, you'll get high RPM lockouts or grinding. You'll ruin your synchros, and it's all because the stock hydraulics can't handle the load of the clutch system. They didn't really design it properly. So having that upgraded master cylinder, you're going to push more fluid, get that pressure plate to release all the way properly and not drag. So one way you can actually test that is to jack up the rear of the car, throw it into neutral, and see if the wheels spin under load. So if you're pressing the clutch in and you rev it, if those wheels spin, that means your clutch is dragging. So that's a pretty good upgrade. I switched to the TIC Master Performance master cylinder, and super easy shifts now. There's no hesitation or weird stuff going on. Alright, so let's cover the shifter real quick. The stock shifter is super vague and doesn't feel very good. Your shifts are very vague. It's hard to figure out where they are. So a lot of people will throw the MGW shifter in here. It is pretty pricey, but I think it's worth the money. Your shifts are a lot closer together. They're more defined, and you don't have less of a chance of misshifting. And there's a lot of adjustability in it, so I think it's a huge upgrade. The other thing is, get rid of that skip shift. So from the factory, the car actually makes you skip from, I think it's first straight into third gear to save on fuel economy. You can actually buy a delete kit to delete that skip shift. So I think both C5s and C6s have that. That's the first thing I would probably get rid of. If you're buying one of these used, most likely the previous owner already deleted it, but you never know. So okay, so a lot of the vinyl interior door panels and stuff are susceptible to lifting of this glue and ungluing. So you can see right here this crease. So you can buy a vinyl cover kit to put on instead of this one and glue it all back down with some stronger glue. But especially in warmer climates, you're going to see this start to lift up again and the glue failing, the stock glue. So the other thing some people do is they'll make little tiny pinholes so you can barely see it, and inject glue without taking this whole thing off, but that's kind of a temporary fix. So the right way to do it is just to re-vinyl the entire door panel. Other interior related thing is these side bolsters, especially if you're climbing in and out of them and you're putting your full weight on the side bolster, these can actually break off internally, and there's always a lot of wear on these as well. I know they actually sell vinyl covers for these, but I mean, the only way to really fix it is to get an aftermarket seat. Honestly, it's a better move. These are super thinly padded, and they're super cheap feeling, especially the bottom. There's really not a lot of padding, so I would just get some aftermarket seats. You're going to be better off in the long run. And if yours are still in good condition, I mean, you can just take the seats out while they're still good, and then you'll have your resale value without, you know, tearing the side bolster, and then you have some ruined stock seats. So the last interior thing, and we'll move on to the back. So sometimes you'll get error messages on the dash saying there's a column lock error or unable to lock the column, or sometimes the steering wheel will just lock up and you turn the car on and it won't unlock. So you can actually delete the solenoid that locks the column. That's what I would recommend. But a lot of the column lock errors are due to the battery dropping voltage. So if you don't drive your car a lot, I would leave your car on a battery tender, because these cars have quite a bit of power draw. If you let the car sit, it'll go down to like 8 or 9 volts, and then the column lock system freaks out, and then you'll get all kinds of errors. So once you get the voltage back up, the column lock errors usually go away, but you can also have true column lock failures, and you have to delete that solenoid inside the actual steering column. So okay, so the other issue with these, they're frameless windows. So a lot of times what happens if you roll the window up and down a lot, these tend to loosen up a little bit. You could see that my window is pretty loose, and all you have to do to fix that is you take off this little red trim piece here, this light, and there's actually an adjustment to tighten the window track and everything, and tighten that back up. So what I would do is take that screw completely out inside of there and put some blue Loctite so it doesn't back off when the window's rattling and stuff, and that'll keep the window tight for you. Alright, so the main issue is with these T56s is they have paper blocker rings inside where the synchros are. And especially with the clutch dragging issue, that only compounds this problem. So a lot of these blow out the synchros, and you'll have grinding gears and all kinds of issues. So what you're going to want to do is actually upgrade the synchro rings with carbon synchros. They're a lot stronger than the stock ones. And then if someone's rebuilding the transmission for you, guarantee that these sliders are, and the dog teeth on them are completely destroyed. So mine are actually rounded out, and this was causing my grinding issues because repeated abuse of this sliding back and forth and not having that mesh with the actual gear will actually ruin the gear and the blocker ring. So I'm sure whoever would be rebuilding your transmission would know to check for this stuff, but the issue is the stock synchro meshes are very, very weak. Alright, so moving to the rear end, if you have a C5-Z06 or a Z51-C6 with the LSD in the rear end, sometimes you can get some clunking sounds over time, especially when you're trying to turn and accelerate at the same time. Sometimes the clutch packs in the LSDs wear out, so you have to get those replaced, but a lot of times it's just a matter of putting fresh fluid in there and making sure it's nice and flushed out with fresh fluid in that LSD. The other thing with the rear end is, and actually you can see it on mine, the exhaust isn't straight. So there are a couple ways to fix this, or things to check for. So there's actually going to be some rubber bushings inside of here, that like to deteriorate over time, and sometimes one side will be better than the other, and then you'll get like a muffler sagging on one side versus the other. A lot of times aftermarket X pipes and the rear pipes going to the catbat don't fit exactly right, and sometimes you can get some alignment issues. So you're going to want to loosen everything up from almost the front of the engine all the way back to the catback. Twist it around, make sure everything's lined up, and you can even get like a little board and a jack to have this all sit level for you while you're adjusting everything, and then just tighten it back up and you should be good. But these rubber pieces in here, after they deteriorate, it's actually hard to find those parts. So there's a guy on eBay that actually makes a 3D printed insert that goes in, and it makes the exhaust nice and firm again and doesn't actually wiggle around, and it's a lot better off than the stock rubber ones. Alright, so I think that's pretty much going to do it for this video. Those are some of the common problems with the C5 and C6. Most of this kind of applies to more of the C5, but the C6s also have a lot of these problems too. If you have any questions, leave a comment, let me know. I'll try to answer it. I've gone through pretty much every single part on this car I've replaced, because the stock stuff is just not so great sometimes. I've got a lot of videos on how to do engine, transmission removals, a lot of stuff covering how to fix various things. So I'll leave a link in the description for a whole playlist on builds for these. But yeah, like I said, if you have any questions, let me know, and see you guys on the next video.